So, our first review of the day is going to be the film called When Evil Lurks. Now, this is a foreign film, a Spanish film, and it is a Shutter film that like Dust was telling me that this just got picked up. It had a limited theatrical run, so by the time this review probably comes out, it probably is not going to be in theaters anymore. But who knows? But I do recommend that if it is in theaters, I recommend checking it out, and I'll tell you why. So in this film, it kind of combines a possession film, which seems like a lot this year. We've been seeing a lot of possession movies. I don't know if
Yeah.
yeah, with like The Nun and Exorcist Believer and The Pope's Exorcist and Evil Dead Rise. It's like it seems like we've had a lot of possession movies this year. And this is one this film included, but it kind of mixes a possession film plus a zombie invasion film. Because their whole approach to the whole possession is that it can infect you. Like being, touching somebody who's also possessed by a demon can also make you possessed as well. And it's not just touching you, it's like, even like if you touch their clothes, it can get on your like the scent, the smell can get on you. And they have like very specific rules of how to deal with it and how to deal with a demon. If you ever encounter one, it's like, you gotta like take off all your clothes, you gotta burn it, you just got to get far as away from it as possible. Don't ever say its name. They have like a very strict set of rules here of dealing with people who are possessed. So it's kind of treated like a zombie film in that sense, mixed with a possession movie, which I like. And speaking about those other possession movies, is that seeing so many of them this year, it's like they feel so tired, and they feel so it's like it's very repetitive and a lot of stuff that they do, and it's like what movie can put a nice, interesting spin on it? And I thought that's what Talk to Me did, which I was a fan of,
Yes.
is that it put a very nice, good, interesting spin on the whole possession genre of horror. And then I think this one does it too. Like I said, combining kind of both those genres of the zombie kind of invasion thing, where you have these strict set of rules there, dealing with these kind of creatures, the people who are possessed, and how it's kind of treated of like trying to fight it as well. They said, you can't use guns as well because you can't just straight up, kill them. So I kind of like that. The only kind of issue I have a little bit is somewhat the consistency of the way
Mm.
the rules are treated, and how things are handled there. But other than that, I think it's still a pretty solid film.
Mhm.
I'm gonna pass it to you. What are your thoughts on When Evil Lurks?
Uh, yeah, we've seen a lot of different possession movies recently with varying degrees of quality, from the extreme of kind of campy but entertaining with The Pope's Exorcist, probably closer to horror, pushing down to Evil Dead Rise, and a little bit further as they talk. I would say this one is probably the most. I don't know about you, but this one kind of got under my skin a lot in this one. This one
Mm,
is very gory, very unapologetic about what it is, and it does not shy away. Right from the very beginning, characters die in this movie that usually don't die in these kind of movies, and you just go, oh, we're in for one of these, okay.
mm,
And from that point on, it doesn't let up. This movie is constantly kind of, you just feel like in the environment where the characters is. You feel just as alone and isolated and dealing with this demonic infection is the way they treat it. It just feels so impossible to deal with by just a normal means. And if you just don't know what you're doing, you really are kind of screwed. In every avenue, it just gets worse and worse for them, and you really feel for them because while the main characters aren't necessarily bad people, they do make a lot of mistakes. Some of them understandable, others you're just like, why did you do that? You're only going to make this worse. You know this is going to make this worse. And then there's other situations where like, I don't care how much you care about this one person. You just leave them. Just don't, you
yeah.
know.
And the lead character here, you have Esquiel Rodriguez here, who plays Pedro, and him and his brother. And it's kind of the film is from their point of view. They hear around town kind of what's been going on, and then so they stumble upon this house and they see a person who they call like a rot, basically,
Yeah.
is what they call somebody who's possessed here, and then somebody especially possessed to the point where their just whole body is being taken over, and then when they see kind of like this bloated figure here. It's like you ever see the movie? If people ever seen the movie, probably Blade. I think it was the first Blade, where they go
Yes,
meet the
Blade
vampire.
1.
Yeah, where they go meet the vampire who's got all the computers in front of them.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that a little bit,
Mhm.
where they kind of meet this person. They're trying to figure out like, holy crap, like what are we gonna do? How are we gonna move them? Because like I said, Pacific rules, you can't touch them, can't do anything. So it's like their whole plan is, and they consult who I guess is like the mayor of the town, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and they consult him with it. It's like, and they treat it like, they obviously know what's going on. They know the rules of it. They're very panicked, and that kind of makes you as an audience member panicked as well because they're freaking the hell out. It's like, what are we gonna do with this?
Right.
Especially,
And
yeah,
mhm. And especially early on, someone was sent to deal with it, and unfortunately, due to some circumstances, one of the the experts sent in didn't make it, as it were, or is not showed up, and so you're
mm,
like, so it's just up to these two characters to deal with it in such a local setting,
mm,
and you just feel the tension with them. They treat this thing very seriously, and you as the audience do. And the more the movie shows off, the more you realize, well, yeah, they were right to treat this just as seriously as they did. And
yeah,
unfortunately, because of just various circumstances, mostly unfortunately due to other people being uncooperative, some people not believing them, and other characters being due to just crap circumstances, the infection just spreads. The carelessness or a few other things they just don't think of it. It just starts spiraling, and yeah, I think what really works about this movie is just how visceral it is. I think the cinematography was very well done for this type of movie. Even though there's large stretches of land and area, this movie feels somewhat bottlenecked. You only have a few cast of characters, and this village, despite being the size of it, feels very small, and it gets limited more and more as this spreads. And they move to different places, so it never feels the samey location, but you do feel that tension of there's only somewhere you can go, and eventually you just run out of places to go.
yeah,
And what do you do, especially when things are leading up as they are and this infection is spreading? It reminded me a lot of the original version of Wreck. If
mm,
you've never seen that, that's a very good POV horror movie. The remake is American remake is okay, but if you can see the original Spanish version, I highly recommend it. It's really good and really tense. Even its sequel is still pretty good.
mm, yeah. Yeah, and so it goes to show you, what you can do with the creativity of things, and this probably wasn't a very high budget on this movie,
No.
probably. I'm imagining. I'll look up the budget in a minute, but it probably wasn't very high. So that goes to show you, what you can kind of do here, and really great performances too. But I think the two leads as
Hmm.
well of like showing the panic, showing the stressfulness, and where it comes into I think the inconsistency of things
Yeah.
is how I mentioned, like this thing, this possession, this can kind of affect everything, infect everything,
Yeah.
animals, clothes, everything. And there's a scene where a character's wearing clothes, and then when he takes them off and puts them somewhere, an animal gets to the clothes, and then the animal becomes possessed. It's like, well, if
Yeah.
he's wearing those clothes, why didn't he become possessed in the
Yeah.
first place? So it's like
Yeah.
stuff like that. And then there's another scene where um, like the demon takes over another person's body, then they change personalities, because and everything, and then somehow they revert, I guess, back to originally how they were. I didn't quite get that. I don't know if you know exactly what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
no, no, I know what you're talking about. It happens a little bit later in the movie. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that did confuse me. I was like, wait, I thought they can't go back now they're infected, but then they chose to. But then what we learn later, without spoiling it, what we learn later at the very end, you go, well, then that doesn't make any sense because then once you're revealing later that what you kind of set up and switching back, yeah, there's a few inconsistencies here and a few setups. But I didn't let. Usually, I would be more of a stickler for that, but the atmosphere and the acting is kind of allows me to push that aside. But the clothes one, I was a stickler with. I'm like, well, if the clothes is this the thing, uh, what there has to be like another explanation, like if they had like, "Oh, you're wearing like a cross, you're wearing a symbol of whatever, and so you're as long as you have that, even if you have whatever, you're protected. So then you could kind of hand wave that away, maybe even a little bit. But they
Yeah.
do have a very specific set of rules. So when you, that's also a thing of consistency. When you have a set of rules, you always want to make sure that you follow them. So when things like that do happen, although you go, wait, that wasn't exactly how you, but it mostly follows it. It just gets a little, it just got a little loose there. But I forgive it just because of what it ends up leading to. And it doesn't really abuse it again. So I kind of let that go. But I see what you're saying.
And then there's one time where, like, if you get possessed and
Yeah.
then something happens to you, it's kind of like, like when you're at like Evil Dead and then you get
Yeah.
possessed and then you get
With the dead
injured.
eyes.
When you get injured, um, it's like I think in the reboot of Evil Dead, like when the person is that in that form, and then when they switch back to a human form, they're okay. But then there's one time where a character does do that and they're okay. But then there's a time where a character gets hit by a car and then they look like they've been hit by a car, even though they've been possessed and they don't like regenerate, I guess. So that was kind
Yeah.
of another thing that I was like, why you're doing that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I guess the exact goal or method of this creature theme. I guess you don't really need to know
No,
exactly.
they never really get into the specifics, like, they leave it vague enough that you're just like, "Yeah, alright."
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think it needs to be that
Mm-mm.
explained, detailed that part. Yeah, but I like the ending of it also too.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
it's really
you know,
dark.
yeah, so I enjoy kind of sometimes some dark endings sometimes, and this does have a very, very dark ending, I think. So yeah, I like this quite a bit. I mean, I think if I know maybe it's a big ask to get people another streaming service.
Mhm.
But hey, since it's horror, it's October, maybe, real quick, just get it for a month, Shutter, and you can watch this real quick
Yeah.
when it probably pops on the service. Do you know when it's popping on the Shutter service?
Yeah, it said, I initially said the 26th, it's the 27th.
27th, so next week.
Yeah,
So you can
it'll be next.
it's going to be on Shutter next week. So hey, get it,
Get it
watch
while
it.
you can, especially with all the Halloween stuff. I think Shudder actually usually has discounts during the Halloween season, so hey.
Yeah, so that'd be pretty good. So I would give it a strong tune in for me. What about you?
Uh, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought visually for the budget they had, the cast they had, and I just love the idea is interesting to me. And it was nice to see something kind of different while still following similar tropes. Visually speaking, I think they did a bang up job. Acting wise, they did good. And oh man, the sound effects were so great. You really felt a lot of good moments here. So I'm gonna go with because of all that, I'm probably gonna go with I'm gonna go with a strong tune in, bordering on a peak, but I think because of those small inconsistencies, I'm gonna pull it a little bit down. But it's a solid tune in. If you can see this in the theaters, I would recommend it. I would highly recommend it. If you can't, hey man, next week, check it on. I don't think you'll disappoint it. Just be ready for kind of a really bummer of an ending. But hey, if you're ready for that, you've been forewarned.
Yeah. Mm. So 2 strong tune ins for When
Hmm.
Evil Lurks.